You drank coffee this morning. Maybe you had a croissant. You scrolled through headlines about some crisis in the Middle East, a border dispute, a regional war, a power struggle in a part of the world that never seems to settle. You didn't think twice about any of it. But here is what almost nobody knows. The coffee you drank was popularized in Europe by one empire. The word coffee, kahve in Turkish, entered Western vocabulary through their trading networks. The croissant on your plate was reportedly inspired by a battle when the bakers of Vienna shaped their pastries into the crescent moon of the enemy who had just tried to destroy their city. And that crisis in the Middle East you half read about, those borders, those tensions, that unfinished map, that is the direct aftermath of one empire's collapse. That empire is the Ottoman Empire. 600 years, 3 continents, 30 million people at its peak. An empire that outlasted Rome, that produced some of the greatest architecture in human history, that held together Christians, Muslims, and Jews in a single state for longer than the United States has existed, and whose fall created the instability we are still living inside today. This is that story, and you have been missing it your entire life. To understand the Ottomans, you need to understand the world they were born into, and that world, in the year 1258, was on fire. The Mongols had just sacked Baghdad, the greatest city in the known world, a city of libraries, hospitals, and 1 million people. Gone. The Abbasid Caliphate, which had held the Islamic world together for 5 centuries, was destroyed in a single campaign. The last caliph was executed. The great irrigation canals of Mesopotamia were shattered and never rebuilt. The Mongol destruction pushed entire peoples westward. Refugees, warriors, scholars, farmers, all of them flooding toward Anatolia, the peninsula we now call Turkey. Among those displaced peoples was a small Turkic tribal group called the Cayi, perhaps 400 households, moving their herds and their families through a landscape of ruined certainties. Their leader was a man named Ertugrul. He made one smart decision. He attached his tribe to the weakening Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, fighting on their western frontier in exchange for grazing land. The land he received sat right on the blurry border between the Byzantine world and the expanding Turkic presence. It was the perfect position for what his son was about to do. That son was born in the year Baghdad burned. His name was Osman. Osman I is one of the most consequential human beings who ever lived. Most people in the Western world have never heard his name. He inherited his father's small frontier principality around 1280 CE. It was a dangerous, chaotic borderland, Byzantine fortresses to the west, Mongol pressure from the east, rival Turkic chieftains in every direction. Osman had no great army. He had no ancient dynasty behind him. He had perhaps a few thousand warriors and a piece of frontier land that nobody else wanted. What he had instead was a particular genius for inclusion. There is a story told in the earliest Ottoman chronicles of a dream Osman had while staying at the home of a revered Muslim scholar named Sheikh Edebali. In the dream, a tree grew from his chest. Its branches spread until they covered the entire world. Rivers flowed from its roots. Cities glittered beneath its canopy, and the wind moved through the leaves like a prayer. When Osman woke and described the dream, Edebali interpreted it as a sign of divine destiny. Then he gave Osman his daughter in marriage. This was not merely a love story, it was a political declaration. By marrying into a respected Sufi scholarly family, Osman was signaling to every warrior, merchant, farmer and refugee in the region, that his project had spiritual legitimacy, that it was something more than another tribal raid. It was a civilizational claim. And he backed it up with something remarkable. The early Ottoman state was open to everyone. Byzantine Christian knights joined his forces. Greek artisans built his fortifications. Jewish merchants helped finance his campaigns. Muslim scholars provided ideological authority. In an era of rigid religious boundaries, Osman built a frontier enterprise that welcomed anyone willing to fight for it and live within its emerging order. His military strategy was equally patient. He did not charge the walls of Constantinople. He picked off outlying Byzantine fortresses one by one: Karacahisar, Bilecik, Yenisehir, slowly strangling Byzantine control of northwest Anatolia. In 1302, at the Battle of Baphaeus, his forces defeated a Byzantine army near the Bosphorus. Byzantine settlers began to flee. The hinterland of the greatest city on earth was becoming Ottoman territory. Osman died around 1326, just as the city of Bursa fell to his son Orhan. His last instruction was simple: take Bursa and bury me there. Orhan did both. 2 generations later, Orhan's forces crossed the Dardanelles into Europe. The Ottomans had arrived on a second continent, and they were never going to leave. What followed over the next century was one of the most rapid territorial expansions in medieval history. Murad I, Orhan's son, was the ruler who transformed the Ottoman Beylik into something that genuinely deserved the name empire. He was the first to officially use the title Sultan, and he created something that would define Ottoman military power for the next 2 centuries: the Janissary Corps. The Janissaries were recruited as boys from Christian families in the Balkans, a system called the Devshirme. They were converted to Islam, educated in palace schools, and trained from childhood to be absolutely loyal to the Sultan alone. No family ties, no tribal loyalties, no competing interests. They were the Sultan's men, body and soul, and they became the most feared infantry force in the world. With this instrument, Murad swept across the Balkans. Thrace fell. Adrianople became the new Ottoman capital, a city in Europe, renamed Edirne. Serbia was broken at the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, the battle that became the central wound of Serbian national identity and was still bleeding 6 centuries later when war returned to those fields. Murad was killed at Kosovo, stabbed, according to legend, by a Serbian nobleman who pretended to surrender. His son Bayezid, called the Thunderbolt, was proclaimed Sultan on the same blood-soaked field and continued his father's work with ferocious energy, crushing a European crusade at Nicolopoulos in 1996. Then came the catastrophe that nearly ended everything. Timur, Tamerlane, the Lord of Samarkand. In 1402, at the Battle of Ankara, Timur's forces destroyed the Ottoman army. Bayezid the Thunderbolt was captured and died in captivity. The empire fractured into civil war. Every rule of medieval politics said it was finished. It was not finished. The Ottoman administrative system, that careful, inclusive, multi-ethnic structure, proved more resilient than any individual sultan. After a decade of civil war, Mehmed I reunified the state. His son, Murad II, rebuilt Ottoman military power and directed it straight back toward the one target that every Ottoman ruler had dreamed of: Constantinople. The city of Constantine, the second Rome, protected by its famous triple walls, walls that had held for 1,000 years against every force that had ever attempted them. Still the most symbolically important city in Christendom, even though its population had shrunk to perhaps 50,000 people. Mehmed II became Sultan at 19. He was brilliant, obsessive, multilingual, reportedly fluent in 6 languages, and from his first day in power he had a single focus. He studied maps of Constantinople's defenses the way a chess player studies an endgame. He brought in a Hungarian engineer named Urban, who had first approached the Byzantine emperor but found him too poor to pay. Mehmed paid. Urban built him a cannon so enormous it took 60 oxen to move it. When it fired, the ground shook for miles. On April 6, 1453, the Ottoman army arrived before the walls. Mehmed had 60 to 80,000 men. The Byzantine defenders had perhaps 7,000, a few thousand Greeks, and a small force of Genoese and Venetian mercenaries. The Emperor Constantine XI refused every offer to surrender. He knew the mathematics. He stayed. The siege lasted 53 days. In the early hours of May 29th, a small gate in the walls, the Kirka Porta, was left unlocked. Ottoman soldiers poured through. Constantine XI, rather than flee, threw himself into the final street battle. His body was never definitively found. The last emperor of Rome died in the streets of his city, and nobody knows where he is buried. Mehmed entered Constantinople on horseback later that morning. He rode directly to the Hagia Sophia, the greatest cathedral in Christendom, built by Justinian 9 centuries earlier. He dismounted. He picked up a handful of soil and poured it over his turban, a gesture of humility before God. Then he entered the cathedral, and a call to prayer rang from its galleries for the first time. Mehmed II was 21 years old. The news reached Rome, and the Pope wept. Markets in Venice closed in mourning. The last direct link to ancient Rome was severed. A new world had begun. Between the fall of Constantinople and the death of Suleiman the Magnificent in 1566, the Ottoman Empire reached a level of power and cultural achievement that must be counted among the great flowerings of human civilization. This is the part of the story that is almost entirely absent from the way the Ottomans are remembered in the West. Suleiman became Sultan in 1520 and ruled for 46 years. In Europe, they called him the Magnificent. In his own empire, they called him Kanuni, the lawgiver. Both names were earned. His military campaigns redrew the map of the world. Belgrade fell in 1521, Rhodes in 1522. At the Battle of Mohacs in 1526, he destroyed the Kingdom of Hungary in a battle that lasted barely 2 hours, killing the Hungarian king and ending independent Hungarian statehood for nearly 4 centuries. His army besieged Vienna in 1529. He failed to take it. The supply lines were too stretched. But the fact that an Ottoman army had reached the gates of Vienna sent a message to every European capital that the world had fundamentally changed. But the campaigns are only the surface. Suleiman understood that governing an empire that stretched from Austria to Yemen, from the Caucasus to Morocco, required more than military force. It required law. He created the Qanun, a comprehensive body of secular legislation that sat alongside Islamic law and addressed the practical realities of governing millions of people of different faiths, languages, and traditions. Non-Muslim communities were allowed to govern their own internal affairs through their own religious leaders. Christians had their own courts, Jews had theirs. This was not modern pluralism. It was hierarchical and imperfect, but in the century of Europe's wars of religion, it was strikingly functional. The architecture of this golden age speaks with a permanence that politics cannot match. Mimar Sinan, the empire's chief imperial architect, is one of the greatest builders in human history. Almost nobody in the West knows his name. He designed over 300 structures across the empire. His masterpiece, the Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul, completed in 1558, is a work of geometric perfection that architects still study today. Sinan himself was born a Christian boy in Anatolia, taken into the palace system, given the tools and the patronage to become the greatest architect of his age. His story is, in miniature, the story of what the Ottoman system could do with human talent when it worked. Then there is Roxolana. Born a slave, taken in a Crimean raid on a Polish or Ukrainian village, she entered the Ottoman imperial household as a young woman. She was not, according to the sources, conventionally beautiful, but she was extraordinarily intelligent, and she possessed a quality that sources in multiple languages described the same way. She could make Suleiman genuinely laugh. In a court of relentless ceremony and political calculation, she made the most powerful man in the world happy. Suleiman broke centuries of Ottoman tradition for her. He freed her. He married her, formally, legally, publicly, the first Ottoman Sultan ever to marry a concubine. A letter in his own handwriting has survived, a poem that begins, "My springtime, my merry-faced love, my daytime, my sweetheart, my laughing leaf." There are very few documents in the entire Ottoman archive that show a sultan's unguarded private emotion. This is one of them. Suleiman died in 1566 in his tent before a Hungarian fortress on his 13th major military campaign. He was 71 years old. His heart was buried at the site of his death in what is now southern Hungary. His body was carried back to Istanbul and placed in the great mausoleum beside the mosque that Sinan had built for him. The empire he left behind was the largest, richest, and most sophisticated state on earth. Decline is never a single moment. It is a process, slow and uneven, easy to miss while you are living inside it. After Suleiman, the sultans retreated from active governance. The business of running the empire passed increasingly to grand viziers and court factions. The Janissary Corps, once the instrument of Ottoman greatness, calcified into a hereditary military caste more interested in protecting its own privileges than fighting wars. By the 17th century, they were deposing sultans who displeased them and blocking every military reform that threatened their status. Meanwhile, Europe was catching up. The silver flooding in from the Americas caused inflation across Ottoman trade networks. New sea routes to Asia bypassed the land routes that the Ottomans had taxed so profitably. European armies were adopting new tactics and weapons that steadily eroded Ottoman military superiority. The moment that announced this shift to the world was Vienna, 1683. A massive Ottoman army besieged the city for the second time in history. Vienna was on the verge of falling. Then, a relief army led by Polish King John III Sobieski broke the Ottoman lines in one of the greatest cavalry charges in history. The empire never won another major offensive war in Europe. The Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699 forced the Ottomans to cede Hungary, the first major territorial loss to a Christian power in Ottoman history. The 19th century brought nationalism, a force the empire had no answer for. Greece broke away in 1832, then Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Montenegro. By 1912, the Balkan Wars stripped away almost everything that remained of Ottoman Europe in 24 months. And then the final catastrophe, the First World War. The Young Turk leadership allied with Germany. The gamble failed completely. On every front, Gallipoli, the Caucasus, Mesopotamia, Arabia, the empire bled out. In 1915, in the midst of this total war, the government ordered the deportation of the Armenian population of eastern Anatolia. What followed was a program of mass killing that took between 600,000 and 1.5 million lives. It was one of the first genocides of the 20th century and remains one of the most politically contested historical facts in the world today. The armistice came in October 1918. The empire was finished. The last sultan slipped out of Istanbul on a British warship in 1922, carrying the minimum of luggage, ending a dynasty that had ruled continuously for over 600 years. But from the wreckage, one man was already building something new. Mustafa Kemal, the officer who had held the lines at Gallipoli when nothing else held, refused to accept the empire's dismemberment. He crossed to Anatolia, organized resistance, and fought a war of independence that expelled the occupying forces and canceled the peace treaty that had carved Anatolia into foreign zones. Then he did something even more radical than winning a war. He abolished the sultanate. He abolished the caliphate. He replaced Arabic script with Latin alphabet. He separated religion from government. He gave women the vote in 1934, before France. He renamed the country Turkey and moved the capital from Istanbul to Ankara. He took the surname Atatürk, father of the Turks. He died in 1938 in the Dolmabahce Palace in Istanbul. Every clock in the palace was stopped at 9:05, the moment of his death. Some of those clocks have never been restarted. The Ottoman Empire left behind more than a stopped clock. It left the coffee you drank this morning, the borders that define the modern Middle East, the Hagia Sophia standing over the Bosporus, the Grand Bazaar still selling spices in the same lanes where merchants traded in the 16th century, and the unresolved questions of identity and territory that the morning news is still arguing about. 600 years, and the world is still living in its aftermath. If this story matters to you, subscribe to House of Wisdom. Next, we go inside the Persian Empire, the civilization that may have given the ancient world more than it ever admitted. I will see you there.